Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Russ Ganim, and I am Associate Provost and Dean of International Programs here at the University of Iowa. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Cultivating Success, International Scholarship, and Creative Work. I'd like to talk a little bit about this webinar series before we engage in the discussion, sort of how it began and what its purpose is. So, my esteemed colleague, Gigi Durham, whom you will be hearing from in just a minute, and I decided, about a year and a half ago, that there weren't really enough resources to onboard new international faculty or existing international faculty here on the Iowa campus. And so we decided that we could put together a series of materials on various topics to help orient international faculty to their new institution, in this case, to the University of Iowa. So we began last spring with a webinar that basically dealt with acclimation. So how does one get accustomed to the University of Iowa on a social level or on a cultural level? How does one navigate university administration? Things like that. And that webinar was a success. It was well attended. We recorded it, as we will record this one, on our YouTube channel. And it has gotten several views since then. So the idea is to create an archive of webinars on specific topics that are oriented toward the international faculty experience. And today, the focus is on international scholarship and creative work. And so to kick things off, I'd like to do some introductions, and then we will begin our conversation. So, first of all, it's my great pleasure to introduce our friend and colleague, Gigi Durham. And Gigi is a professor of journalism and mass communications here at the University of Iowa. She is also in the office of the Ombudsperson and has a long and distinguished faculty career. Next, we've got Ali Salem, or Aliasger Salem, who is an associate vice president for research. He also holds the Lyle and Shannon Bigley Endowed Chair and Professor in Pharmaceutical Sciences and Experimental Therapeutics. Similarly, we have joining us Christy Nabhan-Warren, who is also in the Office for the Vice President for Research as an Associate Vice President. She is a professor of the V.O. and Elizabeth Kalficki Chair in Catholic Studies. And Christy has various appointments in joint appointments in religious studies, but also gender, women's, and sexuality studies. And maybe there's another one too, Christy. I'm not sure. But she wears many, many hats.
History.
Very good. And so, along with our distinguished administrators, I would like to ask our faculty members to introduce themselves. I'll start with Monica Correa from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Monica, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Just very briefly here, I'm Monica Correa. I am with the School of Art History, and Design, and I'm a professor, and I'm the head of the 3D design program. And just to give just a little more background, I'm from Brazil originally.
Great, great, very good. And Luis Martin Estudillo.
Hi, my name is Luis Martin Estudillo. I'm a professor in the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and I'm also the director of the Obermann Center, which is our wonderful interdisciplinary research center. I'm going to post on the webinar chat the address for the Obermann, which is an institution that's open to all of you, students, faculty, emeritus faculty at the university who are interested in doing interdisciplinary research. So please visit us through the website or in person.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so before we get to questions, just a couple of notes. One is that if you have questions, please feel free to submit them via the Q&A function. We will monitor the questions over the course of the discussion. Similarly, as we noted, this webinar will be recorded and posted on our YouTube channel. And I would like to thank our team in media relations here at International Programs, specifically Amy Green, who's monitoring the tech, and Daniel Vorwerk, who put together today's webinar. And so with that, Gigi, would you like to pose the first question?
Yes, thanks, Russ. And before I do get to the first question, I just want to preface that by saying that one of the motivations for me for working on this panel is that some years ago, faculty who were on the International Programs Faculty Advisory Council developed some guidelines for promotion and tenure in relation to international scholarship. And if I can, I'd like to share my screen. I think I'll be able to do that. Yes. And show everyone that document because it's really interesting in terms of how it reminds, this is posted on the provost website and I can put the link in the chat as well, but it reminds promotion and tenure committees that the guidelines do emphasize that scholars at the University of Iowa should have unmistakable recognition, nationally and internationally. And then it goes on to offer some best practices for promotion and tenure evaluators, internal ones. So recognizing that often the kind of research that requires knowledge of languages other than English, especially non-European languages, require more resources, more time than research conducted in English. Research conducted abroad usually takes a little bit longer. Research done in collaboration with non-US scholars and institutions requires strong international partnerships. Again, perhaps taking a little bit longer and requiring extra effort on the part of the faculty member and so on. So it has this list of best practices, and I think they are really invaluable in, for remembering what is at stake and what goes into doing international scholarship. So I'm actually going to post that URL in the chat, and just so everyone can have access to that. And I think if anyone in the audience is a junior scholar too, it would be a good idea to have that so that you can talk to your promotion and tenure committee and your DEO about it.
Right.
Okay.
We especially want administrators to pay attention to these guidelines. So when international faculty members go up for tenure and promotion, or even just reappointment, that these guidelines serve as a resource to kind of give context to the international faculty experience.
Yes, exactly. And so I really think they're very helpful and should be widely circulated and used. So with that, I will move along to my first question for all the panelists, the panelists that we have with us today. Could you, some of you already mentioned your country of origin, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your trajectory as an international scholar. What is your country of origin? How did you come to the University of Iowa? And how did you find your way to success here? And I will start with Monica.
Thank you, Gigi. Well, my path is very long, and I will try to, tell the story in a shorter time. So I'm originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm an architect. I worked as an architect professionally for 12 years in Brazil before I came to Iowa in 1997, and I came because of my husband. He came to do cardiovascular research. And I decided I was here. I wanted to do something, so I did an IMFA degree. And after 3 years, went back to my country and was working in Brazil. And the position of my my mentor became available, and I came back to the U.S. And since then, I've been the head of the program. So to me, the experience, being Brazilian in the US and learning to become a faculty was already a very interesting experience, learning about things that if you don't grow up here, if you don't go to high school here or, as a college, there are pieces of information that you have to learn on the way. To understand the American system, which is what I did in the beginning to get a sense. Besides, as the head of the program, I had to have a very good idea of how the structure looked like. And because my field of research being three-dimensional design, so I kind of transitioned from architecture, which is about the same but different, furniture, product, installations. So the field of design is international. And the need to push myself to interact with people abroad was absolutely like necessary. Places such as Milan in Italy and London in the UK are destinations for designers. And then that's how I kind of pushed my research to apply for juried exhibitions in these countries and participating, getting, the work there. This was something that I started as early as I was able to in my career here. And that was really good for the connections and also understanding the curriculum, and only had a rounded experience for me and the students that I oversee, which I also push the students to have those international relationships by taking them to the venues such as Milan and New York, where we also have an international show there. So that's as short as I can make. Did I forget anything?
Yeah, I don't think you did. Thank you so much. And we'll get, I think we'll get farther into some of the issues that you brought up, as with our other questions. And I'm glad you also brought up that, the connection with teaching. This is a research panel, but of course, the way we mentor our students and all of that is so connected with international scholarship. So yeah, that's great. Maybe I'll move to Luis to answer the same question.
Sure. Thank you, Gigi. Well, I'm originally from Spain, from a working class family. I'm a first generation university student and now scholar. And I guess in part, I'm thankfully the product of a golden age of public education in Spain, in Europe, and in Minnesota, I must say, because I always attended schools thanks to scholarships and grants and always in the public system. I mentioned also the European Union because I was the lucky recipient of scholarships from the Spanish government, but also from the European Union. When I was at university in Spain doing my undergrad, I received a Erasmus scholarship, and I did part of my college education in Edinburgh in the UK. And then I came to the US to get first an MA and then a PhD at the University of Minnesota. And all of that was done through the munificency and generosity of public institutions. And I remain very committed to public education because of that. At different stages in my career, I've had opportunities in the private sector of education, and I've stuck, and happily, I must say, very committed to public education here. Also, keeping in mind always that international dimension, because to me it has always been very important to share with the students the importance of being exposed to the rest of the world. And I've been involved in several initiatives regarding study abroad, for instance. I've been leading study abroad programs basically since I got here at the University of Iowa. And that has been one of the most rewarding aspects of my career here. So I'm super happy. And I would say to colleagues that the University of Iowa is actually a very good place for international scholars, both on the side of the students, but also for the faculty. And we can talk about this a little bit later, but I've always found a lot of flexibility from the administration to do an encouragement to do international work. And in the trickier parts of the international part of our profession, for instance, journals abroad and stuff like that, I've always found that the administration has been attentive and very ready to listen and pay attention to the differences of those media. Okay.
Thank you for saying that. That's great to hear. Yeah, and I appreciate the role of public education in your trajectory. So then we'll turn to Don.
And maybe we could just do a quick introduction. Don, great to see you. We'll just ask you briefly to introduce yourself. Now, you are a U.S. scholar who does a lot of international work, so your experience is a bit different from that of Monica and Luis. At the same time, your perspective is quite valuable. So please just give us a quick intro, and then we'll ask you to respond to Gigi's question about your trajectory as an international scholar.
Thank you, Russ. Just very quickly, um, I just finished up in July my 24th year of serving as a dean. So now I'm back in the academic ranks and uh, appreciate having shed the administrative responsibility. Um, I think Ali's especially glad that I'm out of that role, huh, Ali? Uh, the
Don was an awesome dean, I'll just add that.
Thanks, Ali. Yes, I've been involved. I'm a native citizen of the United States, born and raised in Massachusetts. And uh, my time working internationally goes back well over 25 years. Um, began in my days when I was working in Bethesda, Maryland, and did quite a bit of work on international development of international educational programs at both the student level and postgraduate residency training level. Um, that continued then when I became dean at the University of Rhode Island, so much so then that I became an active member of what's known as the International Pharmacy Federation. They're based in The Hague. The focus of my work over the last 2 decades, which is what Russ was referring to, has been largely centered on underserved populations in developing countries. Um, Jeepers Criminy, I've been to many countries, worked with many ministries of health and education, with a principal focus on, first of all, determining what the level of patient care delivery is from a pharmacy perspective, and then working my way back from that in terms of what education is needed, what postgraduate residency training is needed, what systems changes might be needed. And so as a consequence, I've had the wonderful good fortune of, as I said, working with a goodly number of countries. And um, I am honored to say that this has become an important dimension of my own professional portfolio, something that I'm very proud of. Having grown up in a lower socioeconomic environment, and now having been educated and seeing the power of education and training, and now having the opportunity to give that back both domestically and globally is fulfilling beyond words. So thank you.
Great. Many thanks for that, Don. And so now I'll just kind of jump in with my question, and that is, and I would invite actually the the entire group assembled here to chime in if they so wish. So what was your experience going up for promotion and or tenure as an international scholar or even a domestic scholar, because there is overlap. We'll focus on the international, but there's room for the domestic. Specifically, what do you think the international focus of your research, or how the international focus impacted the process when you were going up for tenure and promotion? Maybe we'll start with Luis.
Sure. I would say that one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I got to grad school was from my mentor, who was actually Italian. He told me, "You are lucky enough to have your feet in two different parts of the world. Keep them there." As in, keep working with people in Europe, in Latin America, because of obvious connections too, and in the US, and it's going to enrich your career immensely. And he was right. It comes with challenges, of course, as the very important document that Gigi showed before demonstrates and puts very well. But it can be, again, terribly enriching. I have published, I was trying to count, in 7 different languages scholarship. That means that evaluating my work can be a little bit challenging. But again, through dialogue, and I repeat what I said before about the administration having been quite attuned to these challenges, you can sort of explain where things are. And particularly for people after tenure, when you get more freedom to publish in different sort of venues, it gets easier. Before tenure, though, I would say that something that I also appreciated when I first arrived here, and a colleague told me, is that do not be too original in terms of the venues where you publish your scholarship. Definitely go for international venues, but make sure that solid scholars in the US have used them before, so that when the moment comes, you can prove to the different committees that those venues are legit and prestigious, and so on and so forth. So again, in my case, for instance, my first two monographs were published in Spanish by Spanish publishing houses, and it was no problem because the evaluators knew to how to identify them as good presses and so forth. But it may always require a little bit of additional explanation and proof that those venues are valid ones.
Very good. And Monica, can you share your experience from a P&T perspective?
Sure. I think when I started here, and even as a grad student, was somewhat clear to me that international connection was impactful. I saw like my mentor was Chinese. My second mentor, if I may, was Korean. This country is amazing by providing that opportunity that we have people from all over the world in a department. So I saw that this was things that they were already doing when I was in grad school, these international connections. So when I started as a faculty here, I was aware of that importance, that of course the connections in the country are also important. The recognition in the country is important, but the connections to the international level, as the world is moving to be completely connected with the evolution of technology, it's almost like a no-brainer. I mean, you needed to understand that you're no longer just in one place. You can reach out all the places. So yes, I would say definitely the accomplishments that I had with the international exposure was extremely important to showcase the efforts and where my work was getting, it's not published but exhibited. So that recognition was extremely important.
Right, because I think what both of you are talking about are the audiences that you attract through your research. And obviously, either if you're publishing in different languages or if you are connecting with scholars from all over the world, your work gets wider exposure. And
Exactly.
we know that our profession can, at least in some instances, tend to be a bit insular and inward looking. And so that global aspect or that global dimension really creates, further outlets for your research and a greater readership. And so kind of the second part of this question I'm going to ask to Christy, Ali, and Don, because you've all served in administrative capacities as well as in your scholarly capacity. So can you tell us, a little bit about kind of your experience in terms of either mentoring international scholars or publishing in international venues and how that has shaped your own career trajectories? Maybe I'll start with Christy.
Yeah, Russ, thanks for the question. It's a great one. Can you all see me? I can't tell.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, just a little bit of my own background. So, I have studied abroad in Cuernavaca, Mexico, and I conducted a bunch of the research for my second book back in the mid 2000s in Mallorca. And so I've long valued international collaborations. And so now, as an administrator and someone who still works with grad students, I work very closely with two grad students from Nigeria. And one of the things that's as their mentor in their writing, but also just kind of like in everyday life. So when one of my students arrived here, she didn't have a winter coat, and there were all these like cultural things, right? This is the first time she had been outside of Nigeria in the United States. And so I think that one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how much of the slack our departmental administrators take up, like Robin Burns in religious studies, did, really had Herculean efforts doing things, taking Osama and grocery shopping and having her over. And certainly I did those things too. But I think that it really takes a village. And I think that's one thing I really realized as someone who's US born, I have not studied, for a degree abroad in the sense that my students do. Another grad student I work with closely, also from Nigeria, he got his MA from Baylor. And so when he came here for his PhD, there weren't as many surprises as there might have been when he came, went from Nigeria to Baylor. And so I think that as an advisor or mentor, one of the things I realize is just before my students come here, or international students I work with, to really be mindful of all their needs, things that maybe I didn't, have to think about, right, as a U.S. born scholar. So I think that's something that I think about a lot. And also now as an administrator, Russ knows this well, but we had a lovely experience this summer traveling to Cluj-Napoca in Romania, in the Transylvanian region, although we did not see any vampires, but we were looking, but we did not see any. But we've been working with University of Babeș-Bolyai to have a research exchange with faculty, the Erasmus Plus, it's called. And that's humming along, and I have to sign some things soon and have our so that's really exciting because as a scholar, and who's someone who's in the research office, one of the metrics that I think we can improve on, and again, Russ and I have talked about this, is helping to amplify and increase international collaborations among our scholars here and scholars abroad. And so when a university like University of Babeș-Bolyai reaches out to us, almost like gift in hand, it's really a wonderful opportunity for our scholars. So yeah. Thank you.
Well,
Good
kind
question.
of to that point, I just put in the chat the link to our funding opportunities here in international programs, and I'll probably repost that link at the very end because we want you to use the resources that we have at our disposal. So Ali, maybe I'll ask you that same question, both as a scholar and as an administrator. How have you navigated this international research space?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a strong believer and advocate in international collaborations and research. And, my own origins, I'm of Southeast Asian descent, or of Indian origin, but my parents were born in Africa. I was born in England. I'm an American. So, sometimes when people say, where are you from? I'm like, I can joke and say I'm an Anglo-Afro-Asian American. But in terms of collaborations, we've been very, very supportive and encouraging of academic collaborations across the globe. The College of Pharmacy, under the leadership of Don, was very, very supportive of international collaborations, and so that was something that helped us to foment that. And I'll just show as an example even my research group, if you take a look at this, I don't know if it comes up or not, but you can see like when you looked at the kind of composition of my group, you had Americans, Libyans, Jamaicans, Australians, Iranians, Vietnamese students, Thailand, Indians, Americans, just Egyptians, all in one group, working together, collaborating. And the Americans were learning from the international students. The international students were learning from the Americans. That big blend of interactions really meant that people were getting exposed to different cultures and different areas and experiences, and they were learning from each other and having a much broader world view through this coalescence of everyone coming together and working in the same group. Even though the focus was on drug development and pharmaceutical sciences, there was this greater worldview that was being created through this microcosm of having everyone in the same environment working together. And so as a advisor, as a faculty advisor, to me, that was super exciting to see that not only were they developing these scientific skills and these soft skills, but they were also developing this greater world view through just working together on a day-to-day basis and socializing together. And I thought that that was like just a wonderful attribute that also came out of that experience.
Right. And that's something that really goes overlooked. It's just, when I think about it's not just the sciences, but I think we especially see it in that realm. Just the international teams, the labs that are created that are that have, blend all these different cultures, all these different perspectives, all these different disciplines. I mean, it really is just a marvel. And it can only happen, at large, comprehensive research institutions that embrace this type of collaboration. So congratulations on that alone, Ali. That really is spectacular.
Every day that I came in, it was like coming to the United Nations. It was
For
wonderful.
sure.
So
That's great. Well, it is just so inspiring and stimulating. I mean, you've got, this energy that you're feeding off of constantly. That's marvelous. And Don, how about from your perspective?
For me, so that I don't repeat what our colleagues have already shared, I want to just perhaps kick it up in terms of creating a culture. As a dean, I believe it's very, very important to place importance on the role that faculty play in working with folks from all dimensions of life, different countries. In my case, as I mentioned before, especially those who developing countries and those who are underserved, who, in my opinion, need it the most. Um, so creating that culture, creating that expectation. I can't begin to tell you how many of our faculty at now two institutions, in my case, and during nearly a quarter century of deaning, that I've introduced to other colleagues, encouraged them to get involved internationally and to see them blossom. I could cite specific examples, but knowing then that as an important dimension of their portfolio, that they present either for professional from moving up the ranks or just simply providing measures for continuation in rank that, as a part of their annual review process. It's heartening for me to see how many of these individuals have taken to heart their role and how, as a portion of their service portfolio, how international work has become a significant component of that service commitment that they have taken on. So, from my standpoint, again, I'll start where I started at the beginning. Creating that culture as a dean, I think, is important. When you convey that as a dean, that this is something that's very important to the faculty in our college, then I have laid witness to the fact that then your faculty will follow suit. They'll buy into that. The only other thing I would add is you have to lead by example, though. Saying it is one thing, but doing it is another. And I know that our faculty see me actively engaged in the international front, and as a consequence, I believe that has helped to motivate a fair number of them to do likewise.
Great. Many thanks, Don. And I know that Gigi, you had a couple of additional thoughts you wanted to share.
Yeah, I did when I was listening to everyone speak. When Luis mentioned publishing in various languages and in different journals that are based in different places, that your point was really the importance of selecting external reviewers in particular, right? Would be familiar with those journals, who might be able to read in those languages, and so that becomes a really important part of the promotion and tenure portfolio or process that DEOs should be very aware of, I think, and maybe where the faculty members should take an active role in ensuring that at least the list contains some external people who could read the work that you've done in that way, understand the context and the language. When I was listening to Monica, I was thinking that with creative scholarship, the logistics of organizing an exhibit overseas, that's really challenging, right? That's something that those of us who are just publishing don't have to think about, like moving furniture to Italy or whatever that is. That must add considerable time and just logistical issues to what you do. And so, again, something that should be taken into consideration for promotion and tenure. It's a very different thing to move, painting or a chair or something to, another country and figure out the shipping and all of those sorts of things. And then to the points that Don and Christy and Ali made, I feel like creating a culture is so incredibly important, that leadership matters, and that both Ali and Christy talked about working with international graduate students and postdocs perhaps, but new international faculty also need the same sort of mentoring and support, right? So because some of them are also, we have faculty in journalism who are coming to the US for the first time and living here. And, so extending that mentoring to them and that support there, I think, is equally important.
Definitely. Right. And I mean, in Monica, in your case, just to underscore Gigi's point, the logistics must be just monstrous. And the insurance as well. I mean, you must be worried sick, you know, every time one of your chairs or sculptures is put on a plane or boards a ship. I mean, you're probably tracking it constantly and and trying to make sure that it's okay. What is that experience like? I'm just curious.
It's very similar to the way you're describing, because there is a calendar, and when I travel to exhibit that I have to set up the piece, I usually bring pieces that I can travel with, or chairs that can disassemble, pack flat, or pieces that can be organized in pieces of luggage. And I usually have more luggage than a normal human being has. Uh, so yes, Ross, it's very stressful. I keep checking the luggage. I had a 1 year that I was exhibiting in London, and the luggage did not arrive because I had a connection in Canada. So now I learned my lesson. I can't connect in Canada to go to London. So that was extremely stressful. The amount of time I had to set up was reduced, and I had to figure a way to get things done. Fortunately, I figured, but yes, all of that, the insurance, the shipping, and carrying, most of the time by myself, arriving from the airport to the hotel to the venue. It is interesting, but I developed techniques and I have plans in place. Yeah.
You've got that extra layer of experience and resilience, which
I
comes.
do. And
Right.
actually, that helped me help my students,
Sure. Yeah.
because I do have a very kind of organized method to make this happen. And when the students go to Italy, which I travel with them to Portugal, Turkey, Italy, Brazil, Rio, they learn how I do that. So that experience also, it's important for their portfolio. Yeah. Oh,
Definitely.
and I want to mention,
Sure.
yes, Gigi was saying, I think that this country, when I came back to be a faculty, I already had a lot of experience as a grad student. It's different. I think the international faculty arriving for to have that living experience in this country, they need support and they need help to navigate the structure, how things work. That's absolutely key. I can see the importance of that.
Thank you for sharing that, Monica. And Christy, and then Luis.
Yeah, I just really appreciated Gigi how you brought that up, and Monica how you went with that. It's kind of folks chuckle about it in my office here, but I have at least one coffee or tea a day with faculty, and usually a new faculty member. Sometimes I have two a day. And I try really hard. We meet some of our new faculty orientation. Ali and I have a really great opportunity to do that. And so I try to follow up and I encourage folks to reach out. And actually, quite a few of the our new international colleagues do reach out. And so we'll go to Encounter Cafe or Cortado, and I really try to, in fact, before this, I just reached out to a new colleague in journalism to tell her about our AHI opportunities. And so I'm really glad you brought that up because that's where folks like in our office where we can help make a difference. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Very
Yeah.
good. Yes, because the OVPR also has resources, and folks should avail themselves of that funding too. And Luis.
I would like to add that, of course, we need to be very welcoming and particularly cognizant of the challenges that new international faculty face, but also realize that they are incredible resources for the rest of the faculty here because they come with a wealth of contacts and opportunities. And if I remember correctly, one of the criteria for promotion from associate to full professor is to have not just a national profile of recognition, but an international one. And for some colleagues, whose work has been more insular, it could be career changing to interact more closely with these international colleagues that arrive at Iowa and connect us to the rest of the world.
Definitely. No, that's a very, very good point that oftentimes we don't necessarily connect with international faculty in the way we should. They are a great resource to us. We can certainly learn from them, and that's part of the culture, building the kind of collaborative culture that Don was referencing earlier. Um, and so, Christy, your question, please, about navigating the UI administration. That's something that you know a lot about for sure. So please feel free to pose that question to the group.
Well, maybe I gave a little preview earlier, a little maybe too early. I think, throughout my whole career, what's been so clear to me is how, we hear a lot about like not working in our silos. And I think that's so true. And so I'm in year 3 of this position. So I guess I can't say I'm new anymore, which is a little scary, but but for me, what's been really instrumental into getting anything done on a meta level is working across our units. And so Russ and I have worked together. I mentioned we went to Cluj this summer for 9 day or 8, 9 days. And then I work closely with the provost office to help promote research initiatives. And I also work really closely with the class and also the law school. I've done some partnerships over there. And so I think and even though I oversee the arts, humanities, and social sciences in my portfolio, and I oversee 2 centers, I think it's also important for me to get out of my arts and humanities and social science silos. So it's been really important for me to learn from Ali and to learn from our other Associate Vice President of Research, Jen Lassner, because she oversees compliance. And that's really an area it was not an area of strength, before I took this job on. And so I think anytime I've learned we can get out of our silos and never be afraid to ask questions. When Russ and I when we traveled in Cluj, I was really glad to be with a seasoned traveler like Russ, because although I've traveled internationally, certainly not as much as Russ. And so I think getting out of our silos, having that humility to constantly learn. I never have all the answers. And I loved, Luis, what you shared about what international colleagues can bring to the table. I learned so much in our short time in Cluj from our partners at UBB there. And so I really appreciated you bringing that up. So again, constantly being teachable. So thanks. Maybe that was a lot I threw up, but thank you for that question.
Great. And so maybe I'll ask Luis and Monica to kind of build on that.
And maybe jump in with the question that we had framed initially, which was,
Sure.
can you hear more about navigating the UI administration as well as other bureaucracies? For example, have you had to deal with overseas governments, IRBs in other countries? Were there
Right.
barriers? Are there tricks you learned along the way? And maybe we could start with Don for that.
Sure.
I think you're muted.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, I just have to go back to thinking about the work that I've done. By the way, my parents were Canadian, so I like Ali. I come from a mixed bag, if you will, and first language was French, not English, and so that I think that really helps. Yeah, I believe that when you're focused on on faculty and trying to advocate for faculty, I believe that it's fundamentally important that as administrators that we do everything in our power to remind folks that our work, our scholarship, our service, the teachings that we do, the culture that we create within our college are all linked together. I think that's very, very fundamentally important that those things are linked together for purpose. In healthcare, I believe that uh, maybe this is true, maybe not true, but as a healthcare professional, uh, from the day you begin your program, when you go through your white coat ceremony, which is what we have at the beginning of P1, our focus is humankind broadly. And so when you take on a dimension of humankind and you think of it in the context of education, when you think of it in experiential education, when you think of it and everything that you do is to look to the endpoint, which is humankind. So no matter what we do, how much we publish, how much service we provide, the quality of the education that we're doing it is for us to constantly remind ourselves that this is about humankind. And oh, by the way, we try to bring that within our college itself. For a small college, I'm very proud to tell you that at least this past academic year, our students represented 21 different countries. And so that's quite an extraordinary accomplishment, I think. And I think that too speaks to that creating that culture and getting that buy-in from your faculty. And when you do that and you have a focus that our greatest calling is humankind, then it makes teaching and service and patient care uh, just that much easier. And I do believe that, at least in our college, many, if not all, of our faculty have certainly, based on the esprit de corps that I've witnessed in my time as dean, it's certainly been exhibited and continues to be exhibited in our college. I hope I've adequately addressed, which is a far more difficult question, but hopefully I've done a reasonable job in at least offering my perspectives in how that all culminates together by taking a very complex matter and trying to make it a bit more simple by just focusing on humankind.
Can I just follow up real quick, Don, with a more nuts and bolts question? And just, you're doing pharmacy work, so I'm just wondering, like, just again, sort of logistically, you when you're doing that sort of healthcare work, I mean, do you have to worry about sort of human subjects kinds of, guidelines in other countries? How do you work with that? Do you have to get special permissions from other governments? Does your college help faculty if they have to navigate those kinds of bureaucratic things?
Yeah, no, those are very good questions. And yes, a fair number of our faculty do provide direct patient care, but no, the requirements here in the United States far exceed any country that we go to. And they're working with other healthcare professionals. They're not working independently. So they're usually parts of teams. In fact, quite the contrary, our colleagues overseas are learning from them as they're applying their talents and skills. So there's never been an issue at all about things associated with IRB requirements and human, whether matters of information safety and things like that. We're treated the same way in those countries we are here. For me, it's been so long since I haven't taken care of a patient since 1988. So I don't provide direct patient care. Everything I'm dealing with is either education or service, or more often, my focus really is on systems analytics and figuring out how to build the best systems, whether that's educational systems, postgraduate training, patient care delivery. Work that I've done of late with Russ will really focus on building a system, not necessarily me providing direct patient care. But I am one of the few exceptions within the college. The vast majority of our faculty, I believe the same with medicine and nursing and others. I believe dentistry, for example, I don't think there are any permissions that are granted. The board certifications and qualifications we have as healthcare professionals are readily accepted since we're providing in-kind services.
Okay, thank you. I guess I will also move that question to Luis and Monica. Like, Luis, have you ever had to do archival work, for example, in another country? is it difficult to get the permissions, or has it been pretty straightforward?
Yeah, I would say following up on what Don was saying, is that we come from a very privileged position, which is we're academics in a big American research university. And we are fortunately respected throughout the world as belonging to truly the academic elite of the world. So barriers are usually lowered when you come with a business card from Iowa or any other Big Ten institution and so on and so forth. But that also following up on what Don was saying, serving humankind, I would just like to know that we are the most universal institutions there are because we are supposed as a university to be to try to have a global reach, and what we do here at Iowa is supposed to impact and benefit the rest of the world. This is something that locally is sometimes forgotten, but I think we have to remind ourselves constantly that we are here for the benefit of the state of Iowa, the United States, but also the world at large.
And thank you. Well, it's sort of heartening to hear this. Monica, I was wondering about you. Once I heard the artist Christo speak, and he said that the hardest part of his art was getting permission to wrap the buildings to do the work. And so I just wondered if you'd ever run into any issues about permissions or, censorship or anything like that.
Permissions, no. What I run into, which could be happening here, was with people claiming copyrights of things that they thought they were similar in my work, and I had lawyers, actually Universal Via lawyers, taking care of the case. So I did receive support because it was pretty much nonsense what the argument that was being made. So I received help from the university. So that was the only instance because I think in my field, this is very similar. But I want to add just something that sort of connects with the previous question, which I didn't mention on my small summary. When I was in Brazil working as an architect, I did teach at the Federal University of Rio, which is a public university, the best in the state, one of the best in the country. And I teach as sort of an adjunct position. And then when I went back after I received the MFA, I taught again. It's interesting. I think that teaching experience in Brazil provided me a very different perspective from what it is to teach here. I think people do not appreciate what we have. We are really a great university, really well equipped with tools that we don't even have time to explore. Having such a strong international profile as we have is something that is much harder in countries that there's not so much support. And to receive support in countries like Brazil, it's very bureaucratic and very difficult. And it's not, I'm mentioning Brazil, but it's pretty much South America and so forth. So the American system, or the University of Iowa, if I may, has opportunities for everybody. And either if you're coming from abroad or if you're from here, we needed to maybe even have more opportunity of contacting these faculty members that are arriving, because there's some mistakes being made in other countries or things that do not work well that we don't have to replicate or try things. If we communicate more, I think we learn from each other. So this is something that can totally, I would like to meet more international faculty. In the School of Art and History currently, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't thinking about that. I cannot name anybody right now. But it's important to have those connections.
Well, IP can help, right, Russ? And
Well,
you
yeah,
also,
I mean, because yeah, that kind of gives me an idea that, we can, because we have many different affinity groups that IP sponsors. So there's an African Studies group, there's a European Studies group, there's the Iowa Global Health Network. There's the Anne Frank Initiative, the Korean Research Network. I mean, one of the things we could do is to, hold kind of like a lunch and learn session where international scholars just present their work on a variety of topics. And it would be both a social and an academic type of gathering where people can get to know each other, present their research, and kind of create some networking here on campus. My sense is that this would be easy enough to do. So Dan and Amy, maybe we'll talk about this after the webinar. Not something that we will do for tomorrow, as the French say, but down the line. And speaking of working in France, I would like to share a trick of the trade that I've learned over the years, and it kind of picks up on what Monica was saying earlier. So it's true that I'm ancient and that things have changed now that we are in the digital age. Okay, so there are a lot more archives accessible online. So I'll start with that caveat. Nonetheless, not everything that you need is online. And sometimes there are firewalls and all sorts of things. So we know that just putting something up on the web is not the answer to everything. And in France, the attitude, at least in national libraries and municipal libraries, even regional libraries, is that these aren't necessarily lending institutions. These aren't necessarily lending libraries the way it is in the United States. The United States, anybody can come in, ask for a book, as long as they have a card or some kind of access, they get it, and someone either they can find it in the stacks or someone can locate it for them. In France, that's not the case. I mean, it's a little bit better now, but what I learned over the years is you have to make friends with the librarians. You got to get to know them. You have to show up, on consecutive days and not expect to get what you want the first time. You know, maybe have a little conversation, ask them about the special collection, ask them what's in there. I said, oh, I don't need anything today. I just kind of want to know, you know, what's there. And so once they recognize you, get to know you, understand that you're legit, and yes, you always come with your letter of introduction and all that. That doesn't mean that they're just going to open the gates. And because they see their libraries as museums, they don't necessarily see them as these kind of like open access resources where everyone can just go in and start working. So and that's one of the reasons, one of the things that makes international research, I think, a little bit more difficult is that there isn't just this freedom to walk in and take something off the shelf. You go into the stacks or into the bowels of the library and find what you need. I mean, it just doesn't. They're not willing to grant you that type of freedom. So you got to be a little bit more persistent. Got to be a little bit more patient. You'll get there eventually, but don't be discouraged, especially if you're a graduate student doing this for the first time or an assistant professor, trying to get tenure. You're going to have to chip away at it. And I don't know if it's like that. I mean, Monica, it sort of sounds like it's a little bit like that in Brazil. And I know you've done a lot of archival research in France, so you've probably experienced this too. And Luis, in Spain, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit more
Yeah.
open and accessible,
Well,
but
it depends on the institution, but I've
yeah,
noticed both in Italy and Spain that they don't see themselves as facilitators for research, but
right.
as gatekeepers.
Yes, for sure. That's that's exactly the mentality in France is gatekeeper. Well, it's like maybe I'll show this to you if I want. Depends on who you find behind the desk on a particular day. But if they know you, and also if you have some other connection with a colleague at another, local university, like when Paris has a gazillion universities, if you have colleagues there with whom you collaborate, they can help, facilitate this access too.
But
Yeah,
I will also say, Raz, I don't know if you will agree with me, that it it is easier for academics coming from big American institutions.
Hmm. Yeah,
It comes with a certain cachet.
right. It does. Yeah, because as you said before, Luis, if you have your business card, if you have your letter, that stationery, that block lettering, that kind of has an impact. You know,
yeah. Can I add? It is understanding the culture and how they behave and being respectful to that. I just came back from a residency in Portugal. So there is that way of doing things that is not the American way. And I will say, of course, I'm not American, not born here, but I mean, I am American now, but it's something that we get used to very easily because it's great. And then you forget what you know really well from previous experience. And then you go back or you go to another country that has its own culture. You have to understand what the culture is. Maybe they needed to stop for coffee in the middle of the morning, and you
Right,
need to
right.
understand that it's coffee time, and then maybe you should have coffee as well, that, and you should look at these things from the perspective of not being a challenge, but more of actually learning how they do things, because all over the world, people accomplish things in different ways. So what can we learn from that experience?
Exactly. That's all part of the learning process. And maybe I'll just say one final thing because I don't want to be disrespectful to France and to French institutions of research because they've helped me a lot along the way. So let me tell you one kind of positive story, one little anecdote. So I have done, as you can imagine, I've done a lot of research at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. And it had been a while since I had returned to the Bibliothèque Nationale because I was studying or I was doing research in other libraries and didn't really need anything at the BN because I could access it online. But I did need to go in like 9 years after I'd been there to look at a special collection. And I told them my name. I sat down with one of the managers of the special collections, gave them my name, some information, and they found like this archive with all of my previous information from the first library card that I had at the Bibliothèque Nationale as a graduate student. They just dug it all up. And they said, "Oh, sure, well, let's just update this. We'll take a new picture. Here you go." And it was great. So I want, and I think that's part of the culture too, is that sort of once you're part of it, once they accept you and you're acclimated, then that opens many, many doors.
Yeah. I think that's great. Although, I mean, I think as Monica said, there could be a learning curve for somebody who's not
Sure,
familiar with a particular culture like that, which could also add, some time and
sure.
maybe even frustration to the experience. And I had a colleague who was a China scholar who had a really, really difficult time getting access to an archive of ancient manuscripts that were very delicate and, they were very hesitant to allow outsiders to look at. So some of these things I think can be challenging, but yeah, I think as you're saying, once you learn the culture and the networking is everything, right? If you have people who can help you gain entree, things like that, that can help a lot. Um, so yeah, I think the next question is Ali's, isn't it, to pose?
That it is. Yes.
So I'll frame this by saying that I've collaborated extensively with scholars abroad. I work with scholars in Egypt, in Thailand, in England, and other countries. And those collaborations have been both fruitful in terms of international publications, but they've also been great because they've led to a pipeline of highly qualified students that often come with their own fellowships to work in my research group. One thing there's a STEM faculty member is that we're always challenged with how do you support your research group? And when you have a student that comes with full support, that's one mechanism through a diversified funding portfolio to have like a robust graduate group. And the fruits of international collaborations can lead to that kind of productivity as well, which is a good thing. With that said, it's time for my question, and that is, have any of you collaborated with scholars based overseas? How did that work out? Are you currently working on any international projects? And I'll go around and ask each individual that question, but I'm going to start with Luis.
Yeah, extensively throughout my career, and I also contributed to founding a new journal that was from the beginning open access and electronic. And we've always paid a lot of attention to where our readers were. And also, we were always very cognizant of the value of including colleagues from different nations working in different places. Right now, I am co-editing a volume with a colleague who works at a Portuguese university, and it's a big volume. We have 26 contributors to the volume, and they come. I was doing the count before our meeting. They come from 9 different places, from 9 different nations. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
It's all done. Curiously, it's for Routledge, but that also comes with its challenges, right? Because not everyone's mother language or mother tongue is English, and then copy editing can get tricky. When translations get in the way, that's very, very challenging. And so that adds cost to the project, more time. So one does have to take those things into account, particularly when you are dealing with a lot of people from different linguistic backgrounds.
Thank you. Monica?
Collaboration with designers abroad, I never engaged in any, just because these collaborations are in my field are different. There is designers doing research, but it's different style. It's not like you can each one write something, and it's building stuff together most of the time. And this, I never got interested in doing that because of time. There's so many hats, and in order to accomplish things successfully, and this is something I think I would give as advice. It's better to accomplish something well than trying to do 12 different things that may not end up, and of course, depends on the discipline, may not end up in something consistent. In my field, we have to make things and move things around. So, and there is a budget. It's like any project that needs to be built, it will require writing a grant together, especially internationally, bringing people. The cost is already becoming, just by what I'm saying, $50,000 right there. So it's very complicated. You wouldn't need a museum hosting a project like that. So I never had the time because I am in a large size program. I'm the only tenure track faculty member in the 3D design area. I oversee 8 grad students and 15 BFA students. So altogether, the collaboration I did locally, nationally, but not internationally. I would like to.
Thank you. Don? You're still muted.
Arlie, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, we were asking about your collaborations have you collaborated with scholars overseas? How has that worked out? Are you doing any current collaborations?
Yes, Arlie. So both at the collegiate level, personal level, and then at the organizational level, starting backwards, I serve as the chairman of the International Commission that oversees accreditation of academic programs. So in that regard, I get very, very involved in helping to develop curricula that meet very stringent accreditation standards for global recognition. At the personal, and as a consequence, then between FIP and the work that I do there, then that then leads me to work individually with a number of programs, which then leads to my own personal involvement. However, as you know, as a member of our faculty, there are a fair number of faculty members whom I've then gotten engaged with these programs. And as a consequence, we have a considerable number of MOUs with colleges of pharmacy around the globe. And I would just pause there, and Russ can underscore this in volumes. MOUs are easy to attain. The critical piece is, are they effective? Are they working? Having an MOU is one thing, but doing something with it that brings gain, if you will, to both sides of the MOU is fundamentally important. And oftentimes in working in underserved populations, you have to go into it with the mindset that the lion's share of resources will come from this side and go to the other side. What will come back from the other side is just a tremendous degree of personal satisfaction and knowing, especially if you're engaged with them over an extended period of time, to witness the changes that occur as a result of your engagement. So those would be some of the ways. I'm sorry, Ali, I have new hearing aids and I'm having some trouble with them. So sometimes things fade in and out. So my apologies for I was trying to make adjustments here on my handheld to take care of my my hearing aid. So thank you.
It was worth the wait. That was a great answer. No, so those are really great answers across the board. And as I said, in pharmacy, I will say that we've had some very strong consortium agreements. The US Thai Pharmacy Consortium, for an example, Iowa was a central partner in that. And that involved alternating sites between Thailand and the US, with a whole series of universities, and Iowa was part of that, where we would talk about education and research. That led to long-term collaborations with students from Thailand coming to the College of Pharmacy to do research in pharmaceutical sciences, pharmacy practice. And then it also led to us sending students there as well to learn about the experiences of pharmacy in Thailand. And then it was a long-standing collaboration to the extent that Chulalongkorn University, one of the central universities in Thailand, they have what we call the Iowa Mafia, where a whole bunch of faculty are from the University of Iowa and they run that department, and we're responsible for having trained them. So that's like something that we're very excited and proud of, and one that where we've had a global impact.
If I could just introduce a bit of a awkward, humorous moment. So I did an accredit number of years ago. I did, and yes, we've been involved with Thailand, just to close that, for well over 2 decades. That actually precedes my time here as dean, even though I had been actively involved with Thailand before through the US Thai Consortium. I was one of the founding partners of that consortium. A number of years ago, I was doing an accreditation visit at Jordan University of Science and Technology, another institution similar to Chulalongkorn with whom we have a partnership. And of course, as a surveyor, you have to declare conflicts of interest. So I declared no conflicts. And when one of my colleagues, I was interacting with one of the faculty there who I knew graduated from our program, and I was thinking there was another. And when they had all the faculty in the room at the same time, my colleague said, "By the way, how many of you graduated or did your residency at Iowa?" And 9 faculty stood up, and I had declared no conflict. So
it was a big presence there too. I'm tuned for that, and we've had great students from there too because of that. So.
It was a bit of an awkward moment there. That's all I have to say.
So,
yes, we've had those involvements at a goodly number of places, and once it extends over time, quite frankly, you lose sight of just how many people you've impacted, to be honest with you.
While we're talking about awkward, we had the deputy attaché from the French embassy come to visit Iowa, and they came to the office of the vice president for research. And I was about to polish off my high school French and say, Je m'appelle Ali, ça va? And then Russ started talking, and I just zipped up. I was like, this guy is so fluent, it's unbelievable. And that's how he probably got embedded into their systems, because he's just like one of them. So.
It does help if you know the language. It's
Okay.
It's a nice it does create kind of a glide path. But no, but it was great. Thank you for hosting
Yeah.
that delegation from the scientific attache's office in Chicago. That was a lot of fun. And I actually wanted to ask Christy a question about her research that kind of combines the local and the global. I know that people don't like the word global. I actually do, so I'm going to use it in this instance because Christy's done some just marvelous research on migrant workers. Her latest book on the meatpacking industry won an award, if I'm not mistaken. She's done some other great research in that realm, and there you're looking at how international populations come into Iowa or the upper Midwest and make an impact, but also have, specific challenges. So there you're dealing with the scholarly and the social. And I'm just wondering, Christy, how you've navigated those worlds.
Oh, thank you, Russ. That's a great question. Well, my own training is in American religious history. So I was trained by historians, but also as anthropologists. And so, in both of those fields, the study of religion in the US was very US centric and it was very like American exceptionalist. And I think that one of the ways that we can decenter the United States, or at least make it broader, right, is, you know, because when I was coming of age as a scholar, it was like, John Bodner, who's a historian at Indiana, great project, but it's like the transplanted. So it was like whatever migrants, whatever happened on the road over, or the push factors didn't matter so much until like they got here, and then the story begins, right? And but so for scholars like myself, today, even those, we look at the United States and sort of lives that are being crafted by migrants and refugees. And for myself, it's in the state of Iowa and throughout the Midwest. But also, it's important to really gather stories about, what was the migrant trail like? What was the process of, getting your lottery, winning the lottery, in South Africa, and being a handful of South Africans who were able to come over that year. And so I think for me, it was gathering those stories and trying to put together a puzzle. So how would one travel from, the Congo to Iowa City or Columbus Junction, Iowa? So, and really going directly to the migrants themselves and in their communities here in Iowa, to hear those stories. And we've got other colleagues here, who travel to, who not Americanists who travel to those countries. One of my grad students, Osamamin Eduvier Oba, her dissertation is centered on Nigerian migrant women to Chicago, a particular Nigerian neighborhood and Pan-African neighborhood. And she's gathering stories in her ethnography about not only about making homes in this particular area in Chicago, but also she's going to do archival work and talk to Nigerians over in Nigeria next summer to try to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. So it's a humbling process. It takes a lot longer to do it all, but I think it's so important. So I mean, each of my books took about 7 years of research and writing, but I think it's so important to do that, to capture the full picture, to do local research. I'll use it.
Thank you. No, I
Thanks,
appreciate
Russ.
that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And so, Christy, I'm wondering kind of hey, I'm sure you followed up with these groups, right? That
Yeah,
you've kind of tracked what's happened to them, and
yeah.
can you maybe summarize that a little bit?
Yeah.
What's kind of like the postscript to
Yeah,
your
yeah,
research?
no, I mean, that's such a good question because, and I think I've done a lot of thinking on this, right? So I think what distinguishes traditional ethnographic research like my own from more community engaged research? I wouldn't technically consider myself a community engaged scholar because I went to the communities with my own agenda and my own questions, which I think is valid, but I think also what I'm finding out more about and what I'm getting more immersed in is community engaged research. And I think that, our colleagues like Nick Benson and his team with community engagement, Center for Community engagement starts in the communities, right? And, what do you need from us? And so I don't know if I call it so much a research project now, but I've long done a lot of volunteer work with our local Catholic worker houses. We have two now. And so that's sort of something that's simmering on the back burner. But I volunteer there. I'm trying to, ask Escucho Mi Voz, the nonprofit that is centered there. What do you all need from scholars like me and administrators like me at the university? And so I've been working with a couple nursing faculty who do community engaged research. So I think the afterlife of a book is really interesting because I continue to give talks all over the place. I'm going to UIC next month in Chicago. But I think what I'm really thinking about now is short of giving those book talks, which are important, right? They raise awareness, but shifting more into the community engagement part. And for me, learning from colleagues like Nick, Rachel Young in journalism. Yeah, so I think that that's what's exciting for me, constantly learning how can we make our research more truly community engaged. So that's a great question. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. So thank you.
Great. And then, Gigi, I know you've done some work in diaspora studies too. Could you share some of that research with us?
Well, I mean, it's been interesting because some of my work has been with minors, and that sort of
Oh,
adds an extra layer to, to doing the scholarship. So interviewing children, I've worked a lot with adolescent girls in particular, and
yeah.
so in doing that work, just to thinking about first of all, sort of making the connections and finding ways to, have people trust me to work with their children, especially because my research is on gender and sexuality. And so all of that is sort of tricky to navigate. But also like having established yourself in the community and made the connections, getting permissions is really, IRB is very challenging, if
Mhm.
you're working with minors. And I have often had to have my protocols translated into other languages like Spanish. So there are just a lot of extra layers to doing that kind of work. And yeah, you are working especially with parents who may be unfamiliar with the US context or, relatively new to the US context. And so are again sort of wary of what you're doing. And so all of those issues have to be sort of thought through very carefully and approached very carefully in order to, you know, get the data that you need. So
Very good. And so, as we kind of wrap up, I have a question just for the entire group, and everybody should feel free to chime in. And this is more sort of at the, administrative and collegial level. What do you all think are the best tips or are the best practices for domestic faculty and domestic administrators to support international faculty? How can we do a better job of mentoring, of recruiting, of retaining international faculty at our institution? What do you think are the best mechanisms just on an intellectual level, on an interpersonal level, that we can, put in place so that we make sure that we engender the type of culture that Don is talking about, that we preserve the kind of the sense of community that Ali has created in his space, uh, because it seems to me that's a real asset of our university, something that's really distinctive about it. But it's like anything else, you have to cultivate it, you have to practice it, you have to maintain it. So, how do we best accomplish that? Maybe I'll start with Luis.
I would say that the first thing is that we need to acknowledge the importance of the internationalization effort and that it has to be something transversal that happens from the undergrads to the support that you give to faculty, domestic faculty to go abroad and have those experiences with colleagues internationally. Uh, as a university, again, we have a universal mission. We need to go beyond the borders of the state of Iowa to benefit Iowans also. But acknowledging the richness of those exchanges, I think is very important. And sometimes we tend to forget. This is preaching to the choir. We are all convinced of the necessity and importance of internationalization. But sometimes you have to remind some people that even though we are the University of Iowa, we are here to serve the whole planet. I don't want to sound grandiose, but it's part of what the mission of the university as an institution is.
Right. And just to put, maybe a finer point on that, if you look at just international students and scholars alone, we have almost 2,000 international students and scholars on our campus, if you count international undergraduates, postdocs, and then graduate professional students. And that's not counting the international faculty that we have. So internationals make up almost 15% of the University of Iowa's population. And that's not an insignificant number. So that means at least 1 out of 10 people on campus, and maybe even more than that, are from somewhere else or call somewhere else home originally. And so that brings or that adds to the robust dialogue that we can nurture on our campus and that we have to, advance if we are to fulfill our global mission for sure. So, Ali, maybe I'll ask you to expand upon that as well. What are some of the best practices that you have encountered?
So I'm going to echo something that Don had said, which is I think that having leadership send a message that says that international relations, global impact are important things to the discipline really engages all the other faculty that are involved as well, because they get that message and then they are encouraged to participate. So I think top-down messaging is something that is important in this area. The other thing is that I think that fostering the desire of faculty to have those international collaborations and helping to support it is also important. I think that can help to facilitate the growth. And then there's this one thing that sort of aligns with my first comment, and that is creating a culture of this global programs, international collaborations, advocating for it, supporting it, but just having a culture of that can really help to foment it and grow it. And I think that those things are sort of central concepts that can really help for this to be successful. And I will say that, my own experience is that not only have I personally greatly benefited from having that exposure to all of the different international students that come in, but they have had substantial benefits from the exposure that they have to each other as well. And so it's just a really wonderful environment for learning and for becoming much more having a wider view of the world.
Great. Very good. And Don, I saw your hand up, so please go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I'd like to point out is that, again, I'll use our own college as an example. There are certain disciplines where it's extremely difficult to recruit, and one of those disciplines is in Ali's area. So the number of graduate programs in pharmaceutics in the United States, particularly in applied pharmaceutics, has declined over the last 20, 30 years. And then there are a whole host of reasons for that. Well, that's not the case in some other countries like Ireland and Australia and other places. So if Ali, for example, looks at some of the colleagues he has in his department right now, they are international colleagues. These are individuals that we recruited from overseas. So sometimes it becomes discipline specific, where we have a particular paucity here in the United States, but other countries have a strength. And so in that particular case, it behooves us to reach out to colleagues in those countries, find out about the stars, graduate students, postdocs, whatever, or through our international engagement or international meetings that we go to, we oftentimes, just by virtue of going to a presentation or whatever, get to know some of these individuals, and then that in turn leads to a recruitment opportunity. So I want to point that out as well, as sometimes it's a matter of importance to the vitality of your college that you go after certain individuals in a particular discipline when there's an insufficient number of those individuals that reside here in the United States.
And we
Right.
also talk about impact too, because
Mhm.
when you're talking about impact, I mean, we were just talking about Chulalongkorn and Jordan University of Science and Technology, but we trained all those people that are now training other people that are now training other people. Talk about international impact. I mean, that's massive. It's huge. There's an
Right.
entire generations of people that are being trained, and it started right here in Iowa.
Well, we see that in public health in Romania, for example. I mean, we're going back at least one generation, maybe even two. And also in Thailand, the School of Music has trained a number of faculty and administrators who have gone on to do just wonderful things in their home countries. So the impact of what we do is certainly it's considerable to say the least. Monica, would you like to have the last word?
That's a hard one, Russ. I think that leadership support for this concept of the globalization and welcoming people from different places. I understand structurally it's hard because of the all the visas and the paperwork that entails and the cost that there is a layer of cost to embrace people from different places, but it's worth it. So just the ideas that they bring to the university, it's worth it. So if anything, in terms of in making better for the people that are here already, I would say maybe more exposure to how the university system looks like, providing more help in terms of what the expectations are and how things are judged, and so that they have an understanding of the structure of the education system, both undergrad and grad, in sometimes their own department. That's understanding the structure provides a better vision of the whole, which that's I think it's important to be leaders if we understand the whole. So that's, yeah, everybody else has said great things already.
Right. But yeah, that's where I think we have to identify with international students and faculty, put ourselves in their position, and realize that we all have to be trained, we all have to be mentored, and that we have that role. And that with international faculty, in some instances, at least, we need to go a step further. And that it's all worth it in the end. And so with that, I'll close things and just thank our panelists, thank our audience, thank our staff. This has been a very stimulating discussion. I applaud each of you. I'll try to find the little applause uh, emoji. There we go. As I said, we are recording this. It will be posted on our YouTube channel within the next 7 to 10 days, and we'll make sure to let everybody know once the recording is made available. So thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of the afternoon, and we'll be seeing you soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.